Hello beautiful people. I needed a Zundapp motorbike for my diorama, and I was thinking, I have it in my stash. It's in this old Tamiya flag kit. It will be a quick and easy build. I will put a few wires on and do a quick painting video. What could possibly go wrong, right? Wrong. I realized that this old kit is lacking basically everything. So, first we will check all the scratch-built upgrading steps, and then we will go through painting and weathering in order to obtain a, let's say, decent element for our mountain diorama road. Are we ready? Let's go! I will not bother you with simple building. We will focus on scratch-built upgrades. So, the usual steps, such as cleaning, fitting and gluing, were done without saying. The first thing was the brake handles. I took some 0.5 mm copper wire and bent it with pliers. I made a V-shaped cut at the end of the handlebar in order to accommodate the wire. The wire was then glued in position with a drop of medium CA. The excess wire was cut with good electronic cutters. The ends were finished with some Mr. Surfacer 500. Acetone is used to thin it. I took a stripe of masking tape and glued the start to the handlebar. Time for some wires. I used this 0.3 mm soldering wire that I bought on eBay a long time ago. I glued the pieces under the tape and then I carefully wrapped the tape around the bar. I secured it with a drop of extra thin CA and took away the excess with a cotton swab. On the other end, I glued in place a piece of styrene. I glued the other two wires to the styrene piece, but this time I first glued the wires together. It's easier this way. Then I made the spark plugs. I took a piece of insulation from the 0.5 mm copper wire and glued it onto the soldering wire. The plugs were then glued onto the cylinders with CA. I drilled some 0.4 mm holes where the plug wires should go. The wires were then cut to length, inserted into the holes and secured with extra thin CA. The 0.5 mm copper wire, this time with insulation, was used for the exhaust pipes. None of this was in the kit, by the way. Also, the intake pipes were made this way. It was a hard task of cutting and bending in order to obtain a piece that was ready to be glued in place. But hey, look at that! I'm quite happy with the results. I guess that this deserves a like and a subscribe, don't you think? I also put a wire into the light. If you want to be precise, two of them should go into the light. But to be honest, I didn't want to complicate things. Wrapping those wires around is a nightmare. I downloaded the instructions for a 1/9 scale Zundapp from Italeri just to get a slight idea of what goes where. My model is missing half of them at least, but for my needs this will be more than enough. And this is the end of the building and upgrading part of this video. Now I will put the bike on a painting stick, and in the meantime I will invite you to check out another YouTube creator. Rick Lawler is my friend, and you can find some amazing content on his channel Propaganda. He's also doing dioramas and tutorials like I am, so I think that you will like it. The link is in the description. As always, you should wash your model before painting. I use isopropanol and a cheap soft brush for this task. But this time the brush was too cheap. It was leaving bristles all over the model. But unfortunately I didn't pay attention to this. Even during the weathering process I was still pulling them out. So be sure that your cheap brush isn't too cheap. Haha. I used Vallejo Panzer Grey primer and I thinned it down with a homemade thinner. I will not go into details because this time, I already done this a couple of times, my mixture ended up in a glue-like sludge. Luckily, it was at the end of the process. So, the primer went into the trash and the model was all covered in dark. I wanted to try the same pre-lightning process that I use for my figures. So, some Tamiya flat white was sprayed in light coats to bring out the exposed parts. Tamiya dark yellow was used for the base coat. It was applied lightly, so the previous steps were still somehow visible. And for the first time in my career, I sealed everything with a coat of VMS satin varnish. It's kind of strange to airbrush, but it does a great job. You will get all the details in the future when I will know what I'm talking about, because this time I can only say that it was a strange process. And here you can see my paint job. Not bad, I must say. I started with chipping. For the light step, I used this pre-made color that I found in the modulation set from Ammo by Mick. For the sponge approach, I was not using ordinary packing foam. I tried out this dark stuff that you find on the washing sponge. I did some tests and it was doing well. And of course, there must be a very fine brush. As always, I was carried away by the chipping and I exaggerated the amount. Another thing, pay attention to the different backdrops and video light setups. I was experimenting a lot in this video in order to improve the video quality. Let me know in the comments what you think. The light chips were then put on with a brush. This way, you have more control over the effect. For the dark step, I mixed a dark brown-gray mix from those Vallejo colors. I added some drying retarder instead of water. You should put this color into the biggest light chips. It represents the spots where the paint is chipped to the bare metal. And the metal has corroded. Then I picked up all the raised details with the same color used for light chips. This way we make them pop out. All the parts of the engine were colored a steely color. In this case I used steel from Ammo by Mick metal range. I don't know why I was thinking that the wheels would be metal too, and I didn't airbrush them properly. This problem was quickly solved with another color from the modulation set. This time I choose light base. For the rubber parts I went with my mix of dark grey and white. I think that it's a nice starting color for this task. The color was so thin that it was running in the crevices by itself, and two hands were needed for coverage. For the exhaust, I started with Vallejo London Grey, a good overall coat. Then I made some stains with very thin white. Some stains and chips of orange brown were the next. And to finish, some dark brown chips were put on. We will finish this with enamels later. The seats were painted in Vallejo dark brown. The paint was so thin, so two coats were needed for coverage. Then I was experimenting with orange and yellow chips, but they didn't turn out well. You will see this for yourself. There were no decals for the bike in the box. Luckily, I had leftovers from an Italeri BMW. Never throw away the remaining decals. Nothing special here. I suck with decals anyway, so I will not tell you how to do it. Instead, I will take some time here to say thank you to my amazing Patreons. So, thank you Alpenhauler, Jack McKee, Matea Melink and Rock Gercha. The gang is getting bigger. If you like what I'm doing and you want me to become your personal diorama tutor, or you want some daily exclusive content, pay a visit to my Patreon page. The link is in the description. At the end, I cut away the parts of the plate because the decals were too small. The acrylic painting is mostly finished. Now we will switch to oils and enamels. I use two oil colors. Ivory black for the rubber parts and raw amber for everything else. They were put on a piece of cardboard so the linseed oil was sucked away. White spirit was used as a thinner. I started with the tires. A black wash was made and it was applied all over them. Here you can see how the black wash affected the tires. I applied an overall wash of raw amber on the steel parts. I put some more of the wash in the deepest crevices. Time to finish the exhaust. Enamel light rust wash and streaking rust effects from Ammo by Mick were used here. Just put some blobs on straight from the bottle and then work them around with white spirit. I learned this technique from my friend Martin, aka Uncle Nightshift, but he does this much better. Check out his channel too. Unfortunately, I somehow forgot to film how I was applying washes over the rest of the bike. Light pin washes of raw amber were put on. Here I started to paint the wires with Vallejo dark grey. As I said, I didn't like the seats, so I painted them again with some thin dark brown color, and then I started to make some wear with orange brown. Now I'm quite happy. Let's put some dust on the tires. I used this light dust effect from Ammo by Mick. The procedure is similar to the exhaust. Put some blobs on and then work them around with white spirit. To add some variation, I added some stains of raw amber oil here and there. And what do you think of this filming setup? I think it's quite good. Let me know in the comments. So here we have it. Let me know what you think. I think that in the next one we will be converting styrene figures. We have a jeep driver who has to be converted to be a motorcycle rider. And he will have the honor to ride this beauty. So, until next time, be good, comment something, and the week will turn around in no time. Bye.